Welcome to, I guess, content lecture number 2. While we're technically at lecture 2, I know that last lecture was broken up into 3 parts, and we're going to keep running with that again. We're going to capping these at 10 minutes because that's all that YouTube will allow us to do. Now, last time we were together, we talked about what is theory, and obviously that's a pretty important thing to talk about since it's a class on communication theory. And that distinction we made between objective and interpretive theory, I explained that that's going to be something that's going to run deep throughout the course. Those are concepts we're going to return to over and over again. Well, while that is primarily the distinction that we make in theories, whether or not it's objective or interpretive, within the field of communication studies, we also tend to break them down even more. We break down these categories of objective and interpretive to 7 different traditions that we call here. Now, what these traditions are that we're talking about is different approaches to communication scholarship that theorists have taken up, right? And so each of these theories that we're going to talk about can be labeled interpretive or objective, but they also fall within one of these 7 traditions. Now, these traditions are often fairly competitive with each other, and they have really at their core, they have fundamentally different assumptions about A, what communication actually is, and B, what the role of studying communication should be, right? Why should we be understanding theory about communication? Why should we be developing theories? And these traditions are going to take wildly different views about them. There are 7 of them, and what I want to do, the way that we have it laid out here, is we're going to start on the heavily objective side, and we're going to be working, and each tradition that we talk about is going to move progressively from a strictly objective perspective to a more interpretive perspective. So let's get to them and let's start talking about our traditions. The first tradition that we talk about within the communication theories is the socio-psychological tradition. As I said, these are going to be moving from extremely objective to more interpretive. So this is really the strongest objective tradition that we're going to come out of here. Extremely objective. And if you remember, what we're interested in an objective theory is establishing cause and effect. And that's what the socio-psychological tradition is primarily interested in. We're interested in asking questions like, who, what, and to whom is communicating and establishing cause and effect through that. This is a very experiment-driven tradition because experiments are all about controlling our variables. And if you remember, if what we're trying to do is establish cause and effect, what we try to do is we try to eliminate as many variables as possible so that we can know that something is causing something else. It is through systematic observation that truth can be discovered. And what we mean by systematic observation is kind of comprehensive observation of a phenomenon. So if, for example, like you wanted to study communication in the classroom, right, it would be through systematic observation that you would watch several different kinds of classes and eliminate as many variables as you can, and you would ask questions about like who's communicating to who in this situation, what are they communicating about, and who are the participants here. Now, the word psychological there, I think, is kind of telling, because if you've ever had to take a psychology class, right, what we're interested in psychology is why you do the things that you do, right? Why is it that you're an alcoholic today? Why is it that you have a problem getting close to people in relationships, etc.? And what psychology does is it tries to provide us a scientific explanation for why it is that happens, right? Maybe you were abandoned as a child, right? Or maybe you have a chemical imbalance, etc., right? But what we're looking for is a reason why you act in a certain way. What we're interested in the socio-psychological tradition is something very similar. Why you communicate in a certain way, right? Or not even why you communicate, but what causes you to communicate in a certain way. What are the things that we can know for sure that this actually causes this to happen? So that use of the word psychological there is kind of telling, and something that you definitely should pay attention to here. On to our first tradition. We'll spend the least amount of time with that one because it's so objective, and we spent quite a bit of time talking about objective theory last time. Everything that we said about objective theory can also be applied to the socio-psychological tradition. Our next tradition, you'll see we're getting a little more interpretive here, but not much. We're still staunchly in the objective tradition here, but it was the cybernetic tradition. Now, the cybernetic tradition is based on the telephone. In 1949, I think it was, Shannon and Weaver were commissioned by a telephone company to develop a model or a way of understanding communication. And to this day, this is kind of in line with our traditional ways of thinking about communication. The elements that are present in the cybernetic tradition are also present in kind of the way that we understand communication in our popular sensibilities, right? What we're really interested in is about how communication can help us reduce uncertainty. The cybernetic tradition postulates that we communicate to try to acquire information and thereby reduce our uncertainty. Uncertainty being things that we don't know about in the world. So because the telephone company commissioned this, it makes a lot of sense that it's based kind of on a telephone model. Now there are some elements here, and usually if we were in person I would draw these on the board for you, but I've done the next best thing here and pulled up this little model that you'll see right here. I just found this online. Oh, that's the wrong one. We'll get to that in a minute actually. So these are elements of the Shannon-Weaver or the cybernetic tradition. Now, the elements that are really important to think about here is what we have, first of all, is we have what they call an information source and a destination. The way that we're going to talk about it here is a sender and a receiver. And so, well, first of all, what happens before we hit our sender and our receiver is that there's something that you want to communicate, a message of some kind, and this is our information source, right? So there's something you want to say. And then what that is you as a transmitter, we're going to call you a sender here, what the sender does is the sender encodes a message, right? And encoding means putting it into some kind of language, right? So for example, if there's information that you want to get to me, right? Perhaps you want to tell me something that you're not going to be able to listen to the lecture on time, for example, right? There's a bunch of different ways that you could do that. You could encode your message via voice, right? You could come talk to me face to face during my office hours. That's one kind of encoding. You could send me an email, right? That's another kind of encoding you could do. You could call me on the telephone, right? That would be another kind of encoding. You could send me a text message, right? You could try to find me on Facebook and talk to me. These are all different ways that we can encode our information. Now, what we're interested in the cybernetic tradition is what we call channel capacity, which is right here. So once you've done that, right, once you've chosen how to encode your message and send it off, right, those things that we're talking about right there, the ways that you would send the message, right, so something like Facebook, telephone, email, that's what we call a channel. That's the thing that once you've decided how you want to encode your information, you send it along a channel to someone else. Now, each channel has different kind of channel capacity. Not all channels have the same ability to relate information across them. So if you came and you talked to me face to face, there's going to be less leakage, right? More of what you're meaning to say, right? Your encoding is going to be decoded in the right way because that is a high channel capacity. I can see things like your facial expression, hear the tone of your voice, right? The pacing with which you're saying it, etc. There's a lot more information that can come from that channel. Now, have you ever gotten a text message, for example, or sent a text message and someone takes it the wrong way? Well, what's happening in that situation is there's a low channel capacity. A text message has very low channel capacity because there's just not that much information that can be relayed through that channel. Because, like I said, you can't see things like facial expression. You can't see things like, hear things like tone of voice, right? So sometimes if you try to joke in online communication, it gets taken wrong because people can't quite get as much information there as there's possible in other ones. Now, there's a wide variety of mediums there, and all of them are going to have different kind of channel capacity. So, right, an email is probably somewhere between a text message and face-to-face. A telephone call would probably be more than an email, but less than face-to-face still. So, what you're interested in the cybernetic tradition is figuring out, right, like how to tell people the appropriate channels by which to send their information. Now, what happens is once it's sent along that channel, it goes to someone, right? It goes to a receiver. And in our situation here, that would be me. So whereas on the one end of the encounter, you encode your information, what a receiver does is decode. You try to sort out the message and figure out what it quote-unquote means. We're at 10 minutes. I'll be right back, and we'll continue talking about the decoding process.